So let's dive into this idea of prioritizing gameplay over visual complexity. When you think about games like Celeste, what stands out is how simple the visuals are. Pixel art, minimalist design, but every element serves the gameplay.
Exactly. It's not trying to overwhelm you with flashy graphics, but everything feels, I don't know, purposeful? Like every platform, every hazard is there for a reason. It's all about creating this tight, fluid experience.
Right. And that focus on simplicity actually fosters better engagement because players aren't distracted, they're immersed in mechanics that feel polished. It's a great example of how minimalism can enhance clarity. No noise, just pure gameplay.
And it scales to development time too, doesn't it? I mean, when you're working with limited resources, keeping things simple lets designers hone in on what actually works.
Absolutely. That's where modular design comes in. By reusing assets strategically, like in Fallout 4, developers can diversify environments without constantly reinventing the wheel. It's a win-win for both players and creators.
Oh, I love modular design. It's like Lego, right? You have these building blocks, and then bam, you've got a whole village or a crazy dungeon layout. But it all feels cohesive, which honestly is kind of magic when you think about it.
That's a great analogy. And what makes it work is the consistency. Those modular pieces are designed to fit seamlessly, so players don't even notice the reuse. They just feel immersed in a world that, well, makes sense.
Yeah, it's smart design. Okay, but here's where I think the real game changer is, starting with cardboard prototypes. Like, forget graphics entirely and just focus on mechanics.
Exactly. It's such an underrated step. Cardboard or rough digital prototypes allow designers to playtest mechanics without pouring resources into art too soon. If the foundations feel good at that stage, it's a strong indicator the game will work overall.
Totally. And it's humbling too, right? You strip everything down to its bare bones and you're forced to confront, does this idea actually work? Or is it, like, falling flat?
That process really separates good ideas from mediocre ones. By the time aesthetics come into play, the gameplay is already solid. Games like Celeste thrive because they're built on that kind of iteration-focused foundation. Building on that idea of intentionality in design, let's talk about how color palettes and lighting can shape a player's experience. You know, it's amazing how much you can communicate emotionally without any dialogue. Take a game like Journey.
Oh my gosh, the lighting in Journey. It's stunning, right? Like when you're in those glowing sand dunes, it just pulls you in completely.
Exactly. The designers used warm tones in those scenes to make it feel welcoming, but then they contrast it with cooler, shadowy moments when the mood shifts. It's subtle but really effective, and players naturally follow the light, so it's intuitive navigation too.
Yeah, it's wild how a single flickering light can say, hey, over here, without actually saying anything. It's like a shortcut to player psychology.
It really is. And that's the beauty of strategic visual design, guiding the player's attention without overwhelming them. It becomes a conversation of sorts between the environment and the player.
Totally. But readability comes into play too, right? Like you need to know where you are and where you're going without being confused. That's where distinct landmarks work wonders.
Absolutely. In The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, for instance, the developers use things like shrines and unique terrain features to create natural waypoints. You don't even need a map all the time. The game just guides you smoothly.
Right, like those glowing shrines. You see one in the distance, and it's like this immediate, okay, goal, I'm heading there. It's super intuitive.
And what's more, it minimizes frustration. If players get lost too often, they lose immersion. Intelligent use of landmarks ensures they spend more time exploring and less time trying to figure out where they're supposed to go.
I've been on the wrong end of that too many times. I remember this one project where we just didn't think it through. And yeah, players got stuck. Like, completely stuck.
That's a tough lesson. A confusing layout can break the flow, even in a great game. It's why constant player feedback is essential. Iterating to fix those little pain points makes a huge difference.
It's humbling. But you're so right. Good design doesn't just happen. It's all those revisions and sometimes going back to basics. Like making paths and checkpoints clear. You'd think it's obvious, but it's not always easy in practice.
For sure. And with color, lighting, and strong landmarks, The game world essentially becomes its own silent guide for players. Speaking of guiding players intuitively, environmental storytelling takes that even further. It's amazing how you can weave entire backstories into the world's details without saying a word. The Fallout series, for instance.
Oh, like those journals you find, or the skeletons just scattered around, totally frozen mid-action. I mean, you just know something terrible went down without anyone spelling it out.
Exactly. Those small, carefully placed details make the world feel lived in. You see a tipped over chair, a dusty revolver, and a bottle of whiskey, and suddenly you're imagining this whole scene. It's this level of intentional design that makes players stop and connect emotionally.
And the best part is, it's so personal. Like, what I notice in a scene might be totally different from someone else. It keeps the world, well, I guess, dynamic, alive.
Right. And when you pair that with sound design, the immersion goes to a whole other level. Have you played Inside? That game has some of the most hauntingly effective audio I've ever experienced.
Oh, Inside. I still get chills from that part in the water with, her. The sound design totally makes the tension unbearable. In the best way.
Exactly. The developers used a minimalist approach with sound cues to build this oppressive atmosphere. It's subtle but relentless, crafting emotions purely through what you hear. And it's not just creepy moments.
Totally. Even the silence, right? That empty sound where you're almost holding your breath. Because, you don't want to disturb the quiet. It's genius.
That's the beauty of thoughtful sound design. It doesn't always have to be loud to be effective. Ambient noise, for instance, can subtly guide players. A faint echo or dripping water might hint at a cavern around the corner without needing a visual cue.
And it's crazy how much collaboration goes into that. Like, working with sound teams, they'll find these little moments to sneak something in. A faint hiss or distant footsteps, and suddenly, the whole room feels alive.
Absolutely. And when those audio elements line up with the visual storytelling, it's seamless. Players aren't just in the game, they feel like they're part of it. That's immersion at its finest.
Honestly, it's the kind of stuff you don't notice until it's missing. Like, bad sound can pull you right out of the experience. But great sound, it elevates everything.
Exactly. At the end of the day, sound and storytelling work together to create a world that feels real. And that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? To make players forget they're even playing a game.
For sure. And that's what makes game design such an art. We're not just building levels or coding mechanics. We're crafting experiences. It's kind of magical when you think about it.
It really is. And that's all for today. It's been great breaking this down with you.
Yeah, this was a blast. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you